that this is going to be the catalyst that's going to make this thing work, right? This ETF is going to be the single biggest thing in the history of Bitcoin as far as institutional adoption. And it's everything up until then, there was like pre-ETF and after ETF, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to get to $1 million of Bitcoin is if you get, several $100 billion of new inflows to buy, right? If you do that, you are going to get to $1 million a coin, But you need to get these big inflows. These big inflows will not happen without the ETF, and that is just that simple. The power law tells you very precisely. It says 10 years from now, you're going to be somewhere between 500,000 and 3 million. Bitcoin has a tremendous upside over a 10-year time frame. So yes. I would sort of say, what's the right allocation for Bitcoin? Probably 70% of your portfolio. That's probably the correct number, right? Like mathematically, that's kind of what I would say.
Fred Krueger begins by emphasizing that the Bitcoin ETF is the single most significant catalyst for institutional adoption in Bitcoin's history. He draws a line in the sand, categorizing Bitcoin's timeline into pre-ETF and post-ETF eras. Before the ETF, traditional finance largely misunderstood Bitcoin, treating it as just another speculative asset alongside Ethereum, Solana, and other cryptocurrencies. The finance industry underestimated the transformative power of the Bitcoin ETF and its implications for mass adoption. The ETF's role extends beyond providing easy access to Bitcoin investments. It acts as a gateway for institutional capital to flow into the market. For Bitcoin to reach monumental price targets like $1 million per coin, Krueger asserts that hundreds of billions in new inflows are necessary, and these inflows are unlikely to materialize without the accessibility and legitimacy that an ETF offers.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
The finance people didn't understand what Bitcoin was. And they just viewed this as like, well, okay, we got this ETF. We'll do Bitcoin and we'll do Ethereum next, we'll do Solana next, it's like,
but that didn't go very well.
There's one new ETF every day in general, right?
Yeah.
So I think the ETF guys underestimated how big of an opportunity this was for this year, but also just like how big it's going to be for the next 5 years, right? Completely underestimated it. And so that's kind of where I stand on this. I think both parties underestimated. I think the pure crypto people underestimated how big it was, and the finance guys as well. To get to the next phase, what we need, which is also to get to the next phase in price, right? Like to get to $1 million of Bitcoin. The only way you're going to get to $1 million of Bitcoin is if you get several $100 billion of new inflows to buy, right? If you do that, you are going to get to $1 million a coin, But you need to get these big inflows. These big inflows will not happen without the ETF, and that is just that simple. So, and that's why I think, that's sort of the ETF's the higher order bit, right? In right now, everything else is interesting. It's but it's not the critical. It's not what's going to move the needle at this point. It's going to be the ETF, I think. And I don't think we've seen anything yet, so, everybody was saying that the ETF would be like a short surge for the first 2 months, right? And then it flattens, right? And they all had modeled it that. Why? Because every single other ETF did that, right? They all kind of like start, new idea. Okay, we got for first 2 months, we get a big ramp and then sort of go down. Well, in the last month and a half, we've had the same. We went from roughly 20 billion to we did from 0 to 15 in the first 2 months of this ETF. Then we slowed down in March, April, and then in November, right, early November, we picked right back up, and now we're on this like complete hockey stick trajectory for inflows, right? Yep. Nobody predicted that pattern, right? And so I was saying to Eric, I said, like, you guys did not predict it. And, you know, Standard Chartered had actually made this crazy number. They said we're going to have $50 billion of inflows. And, you know, we've already got over 30. So, yeah. Like, we'll probably end up at 40, you know, this year. So they were almost correct. And that seems such a crazy number, you know, at the time. But I was like, yeah, I'm kind of more in their camp. And I think they, you know, I do think, and they said, well, I said, I got the ETH ETF right. And I go, yeah, you did get that right. That, you know, there was, you know, it's really a hard sell trying to explain anything else other than Bitcoin to an institutional investor, I think. Let's look at the current market cap of Bitcoin, like the 2 trillion, right? Well, okay, that's, you know, you say that's pretty big. That's not a small number. But how much of that is owned by TradFi right now? Well, pretty much the ETF and MicroStrategy. That's it. Right? You know, yeah. So the ETF's like, it's about you're talking about 1 million coins, right? That's $100 million, right? And then let's say another 500, another 50 billion for MicroStrategy, right? So $150 billion is kind of how much the entire pool that TradFi can own. That's how much their exposure is, you know. And this is a world that is, you know, $150 trillion plus, right? Yeah. So their exposure really, net is 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1%. Yeah. You know, so you know the wall of money that can and will probably come into this asset is you know, it's 10x is still not even going to move the needle. I mean, it could get 10x as big, you know.
Yeah, it's still
for $1 trillion to come into Bitcoin is not crazy. It is just, you know, we spent $2 trillion on the Biden infrastructure, you know, like Build Back Better or whatever he called it, right? Like, I you know, what I'm saying is, this is after COVID too. You know, like, yeah. You know, like, so, you know, $1 trillion in today's economy, in today's financial world, you know, $1 trillion coming into Bitcoin, it's not crazy. $1 trillion will move the price above $1 million a coin if that kind of number comes in.
Krueger proposes that 70% of a portfolio should be allocated to Bitcoin. He acknowledges that this deviates significantly from traditional portfolio strategies, such as the 60-40 split between stocks and bonds. However, he argues that the conventions of traditional finance are outdated in the face of Bitcoin's transformative potential. He advises maintaining 30 to 40% in cash or liquid assets as a safety net, but he insists that most people are dramatically underexposed to Bitcoin. According to Krueger, failing to allocate significantly to Bitcoin now could mean missing out on one of the greatest wealth-building opportunities of our time.
You know, next year, you could be as low as 50,000 or as high as 300,000. That's sort of like, so a lot of people say, well, great, that tells me absolutely nothing, right? And you know, like, there's a law that says that. I mean, that's nothing. And then I would say, well, okay, yeah, that's true. It's not very predictive for next year, but it's actually very predictive for about 10 years from now, because if the power law tells you very precisely, it says 10 years from now, you're going to be somewhere between 500,000 and 3 million. And now you're like, oh, wait a second. So you're telling me it's absolutely going to get to 500,000. It's like, yeah, that's kind of what the power law says. The very low end of the range is 500,000, right?
Yep.
And the very high end of the range is about 3 million. So now you're like, well, that's definitely telling me something very, very predictive, right? That's something that, you know, if that's right, then, you know, I probably do not want to sell a Bitcoin. You know, if I'm putting a Bitcoin in my child's retirement account,
Yeah.
Like and the kids 7, this is gonna, this thing's gonna be the kid's gonna be pretty good if I give him 1 Bitcoin today, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
So-
500,000 will not quite buy half of what it buys today. Who knows, right? But it's not gonna be $500,000 for a cup of coffee either. So in real terms, Bitcoin's going to go up quite a bit in the next 10 years. Bitcoin has a tremendous upside over a 10-year time frame. So
Yes,
I would sort of say, what's the right allocation for Bitcoin? Probably 70% of your portfolio. That's probably the correct number, right? Like mathematically, that's kind of what I would say. 70% of your portfolio should be in Bitcoin. Now, everybody's going to be like, whoa, Fred, you can't, that's irresponsible. You're supposed to be 60-40 stocks. I would say, well, that's just a convention, right? That's kind of like, this current, so sort of like, the church of finance has dictated that that's a reasonable number. But I don't think it is. I think most people would be wise to put the majority of their funds in Bitcoin right now. And, I would say keep 30% around, somewhere like 30 to 40% in either cash or liquid something, just for a rainy day, like in case you need to wait a couple of years. But look, nobody's ever lost Bitcoin over a 4-year period. If you've held 4 years, you've always made money. And, you want to be with the fastest horse. So I think everybody's underinvested, completely underinvested. And I would say most people should be heavily into Bitcoin. It's just such a big jump from where they are currently positioned that unfortunately 99% of them will completely miss it. I think there's going to be bull markets and bear markets, right?
Yeah.
But do I believe that 2026 will be a down year? I don't see any real reason to believe that anymore. You know what I mean? I think we had 2014, 2018, and 2022 were all very bad. But do we really think that means 2026 is going to be bad? I think you're reading a little bit into the tea leaves there. You know what I mean? Like you have 3 data points, and they correspond to this halving cycle, but halving is not that important right now. Certainly if the fact of daily block rewards going from 450 Bitcoin per day, now to 225, I just don't think that's going to make much of a difference really going forward. I can't really imagine that that's going to be significant. I definitely think, especially when you have like MicroStrategy buying 50,000 Bitcoin in like a weekend. You know what I mean? Like, that's 100 days worth of supply. BlackRock's buying 1,000 Bitcoin or close to 1,000 Bitcoin in a day. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, so these we're definitely. I think we're in a different zone where I think, I just don't think mining, it matters if you're a miner. I get it. If you're a miner, you absolutely care about the mining cycle, the halving reward cycle, et cetera. Do I think it's going to dictate the cycles of Bitcoin? No, I kind of don't, right? So I don't think that it's going to make that much of a difference, but, I do think we're going to have big bull markets and bear markets. I definitely think that, why not? I think we probably will have some very deep bear markets and some really big bull markets still to come.
Krueger also touches on the role of mining and halving cycles in Bitcoin's price dynamics. While miners may focus on these aspects, he believes their impact on broader market cycles is diminishing. Institutional demand, as demonstrated by massive purchases from entities like MicroStrategy and BlackRock, now has a more substantial influence on price movements. Krueger anticipates that Bitcoin will continue to experience bull and bear markets, but he challenges the notion that these cycles will strictly adhere to past patterns. With the evolving dynamics of institutional participation and the diminishing significance of halving events, the market could behave in new and unexpected ways.
Please like and subscribe my channel.